Hello, everybody. Not a long while, but it's been a while. I had a beautiful interview with Naomi, and then I was busy editing and putting together these couple of little videos that you saw about breath and about Sihatsu. And then when it was time to come back to the microphone, I have not felt super confident or super inspired, which has been the first time I think since I started this January. It's also a good exercise. Normally, I have responded to my wave of inspiration by doing it when I'm inspired and then dropping it when I'm not, and then going back to my work. But with this project, I'm somehow committed to produce something more or less regularly. So that means that I am also forcing myself to find something when I don't see something super clearly, which is an interesting exercise. Also, an interesting exercise in humility, because when you are super inspired, that which comes forward, you will tend to be happy with it. But when you're not super inspired, then that which comes forward will be something that makes you feel small or fragile or maybe even unprepared or unworthy. So, yeah, it's an interesting exercise that goes beyond the actual words. And today I wanted to share with you a piece of guidance that somehow got dropped to me when I was in meditation, and that then I have been observing and studying on my own life, because it's always different how something fits and how it is useful for you in your meditation practice, but then how later on how that works in life sometimes needs a further exercise of exploration and contextualization. Um, but it's interesting because sometimes life gives you simultaneously the teaching that you receive in your practice. And when those occasions appear, it's like the teacher inside and the teacher outside are collaborating. And sometimes they're a bit annoying. So I'll start from the life part. The life part takes me to a couple of dog owner encounters, small mini conflicts that have appeared in my life. One where I was unskillful, and the other one where maybe karma brought me back the perspective from the other side. So I'll tell you a story. I think a couple of weeks ago I was walking with Moe to the beach, which, just for you to place yourself, is a wild beach, long dirt roads, no services, free beach. People are naked, the animals are free, sometimes you might even see a horse. People are doing some paragliding, occasional surfing, sometimes people sleep there with the camper van. So it's not your organized city beach, very touristic, is really a faraway, wild, free beach. And it's one that is close to my home. So it's my regular walk with Moby, and he walks in front of me free on the leash, and I bring the leash hanging on my neck. And for the most part of the year, when we get to the beach, this morning we went there and there is no one, really. Today, literally no one. Sometimes there is a couple of campers parked or a few people that are fishing. And then in the season is when there is more people, and sometimes holiday makers are also there, and dogs and yeah, more life. So this time I was arriving on a sunny day, and I think it was a Sunday. So the beach was quite not full, but there was people, and there were dogs and children, and Mo is very friendly. I'm very lucky. Both I have put a lot of time, but also his character is so friendly. So I usually don't have to worry much about him. But in any case, my pattern or my way of doing, um, I'm quite attentive. I usually don't stay on the beach because it's part of my walk rather than my hanging out. So I walk behind him, with him. We get to the beach. I leave him 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending how much time I have that day, to play a bit, and then we walk back. So on this day, we arrive, and he does his usual move of walking around, sniffing on this towel, playing with that dog, and eventually he settles to play with another dog. They were playing fine. I went to have a dip in the ocean, and as I turn around, I see the other dog bites Maui in the face. I just rush a bit, and I tell the dog off, scream at him, and the dog walks away, and it's fine. But as I walk to Maui, in my mind, I'm making a story. And I'm making a story where once again there is a reckless dog owner that instead of being attentive about his dog or her dog has let the dog free, and which happens. And yeah, in my mind, I have painted an irresponsible owner that not only has put my dog in danger, but also the possibility of having free dogs. If free dogs misbehave and the owners are not around, then people tend to complain, and therefore dog owners are forced to eventually have to have their dogs leashed. Yeah, that's how it tends to evolve. Anyway, whether that is true or not, this is the narrative that I create on my mind. And then Maui walks again to find the same dog to play, and now I see 3 adults. They're having a conversation. And it turns out that the 2 of them are friends of mine. And they're talking with the owner of the other dog. So as I walk towards them to talk to my friends and also to be with Maui, I walk immediately to the dog and I tell him to sit down, and I give him an order, totally bypassing his owner who was there present, which is highly unpolite. I did not speak bad at him, I was not screaming, I was not insulting, but I was clearly dismissive. In my mind, my narrative, he is an irresponsible owner or a person who is not caring for others. Um, so anyway, by the time I arrive there, takes 20 seconds, but he's obviously disappointed with my behavior. He had no idea that the dog had bit Maui, and obviously he is not an irresponsible owner. The way he is behaving with his dog, he was just having a chat, and he had taken his gaze out of his dog for a couple of minutes, which of course happens all the time. But I did not have enough elasticity of mind to see that my narrative was not coincided with reality, and then a behavior that was arising from that mental image that I had created in my head leaked into a reality that obviously was not concurring with it. And Yeah, nothing happened. There was no bigger conflict, but I felt when the man left that I had hurt his feelings. Probably he was upset with me. And yeah, I think I would have been upset as well if someone comes and gives movie orders in front of me without asking me first. Yeah. So I told my friends, please tell him, offer him my apologies. I was friendly for the rest of the 5 minutes that we were there together, but while with an animal, you can go rough, 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 and 20 seconds there after is forgotten. With people, it takes time. And then yesterday, I got the reverse, the other side of the coin. I arrived to the beach, sunny, quite a lot of people, everybody in a good mood. Mo is playing with a dog, with another dog, and then he sees a dog on a towel and he's going there to play with her. But the dog was on a leash. And as Moe arrives, I see the owner gesturing to me and trying to speak with me. So I pause my headphones and I ask her, what does she want? But she's already in a bad mood and she's already giving me her whole body language was, she was upset already. And Moe had not yet arrived to the towel, and it was a few meters away. And she was telling me, please keep the dog away. He cannot come close to me. I don't want him to get close to my dog. Sometimes this is people who are staying in the tower for a long time and they don't want their dogs free. Sometimes they might be scared of diseases, sometimes because they're in heat, sometimes because their dog is violent or has fears. There's a number of reasons why people might want to keep their dogs on a leash even when there is no need, yeah? But she was not giving me any of the explanations, and she was giving me, most importantly, no friendliness. She was just really in a bad mood. So I had no intention of conflict, and I asked Moby to come. But Moby does, generally speaking, what I ask him to do, but takes some time, yeah? So in the meantime, as I asked him, let's go, he took 3 steps forward towards the other dog, and she was so upset, really, really upset. So I just smiled and I said, come on, chill a bit. And then we left. But then I was reflecting that probably a similar thing was happening to her. Somehow she had a narrative where first her desires need to be answered very quickly. She probably felt very right about something. Maybe even she felt support by the fact that the law says that the dog has to be leashed. Mm, but in any case, her narrative was not matching what was happening. Neither her dog was really chilled. Moe was not aggressive. I was in a super good mood and totally responding to her desires. But somehow that didn't happen quick enough, and she was disproportionately mm, unfriendly, and yeah, pretty much like I was on the first story. Yeah, and in both cases, you see, you have something that is happening, a truth, and then as that something is happening, you are contextualizing it and you are understanding it in different layers of comprehension. You're using different spheres of organization, of concepts to understand the event and to position yourself accordingly. I would call this the narrative, a partial explanation of reality that allows us to take action and to interact with one another and sometimes to build a collective reality, a collective construct where we can coexist with one another harmoniously. And also for our actions to have a certain continuity and certain congruency. If you're driving to work and halfway there you forget your destination or you forget the traffic rules, then the small actions, the actions that deal with the immediacy of life, would lose the connection with the bigger picture of your life. Yeah, maybe you're still driving the car, but if you forget where you're going to, um, it loses the ability of building something bigger than what is just in front of your eyes, which is what animals do in many ways. Yeah, they have very little um, importance placed in their narratives. Their narratives are very, very basic, and therefore they can develop their instincts and they can develop their response to the moment because they're always here and now, very, very rooted in this moment. But for us, the relationship between the solidity and the elasticity of our narratives and the ability to be tolerant with other narratives that are different than mine, to a great degree, it describes and it points at our success and our ability to build civilizations, to build countries, to build families, to build companies, businesses, projects of any kind, to develop a community. We need to share narratives. We need to find a way to reach a consensus. And simultaneously, we need to be elastic enough to change these narratives as the consensus changes or as reality changes or as I change. Yeah. Sometimes it's the nature of life that changes. If my daughter becomes an adult, becomes a woman, at certain points she goes from being my little baby to being this independent human being. And at certain point in there, I must transform my narrative about her from the baby to the adult woman. Um, and in this case, life gives me enough time and also blurry edges. When do I change my narrative? Is it when she's 5 years old? Is it when she's 11 years old? Is it when she is 25 years old? Depending on the father, the daughter, the situation, it will take more or less time. But eventually, you need to change your perspective on what the reality that you have in front of you is, because otherwise you would be calling your baby to a 53-year-old woman. Yeah, and that is not accurate with the reality that you are given. At other times, it's you who change. You have um, a perspective about life or about something, and that something remains stable, but you have changed, and you have now a different perspective of the same subject or the same reality. Not because it changed outside of you, but because you have been the one that changed. And in general, I would say it's a combination of them two, at least for any given moment. Reality, if you start in subatomic particles and you expand all the way till the end of the universe. And then if you consider that maybe there is parallel universes coexisting with this one, and that time fundamentally can go forwards and backwards. You see, you are compartmentalizing a very small section of that reality that is the one that your senses perceive. And then, with your culture and with your gender and with your age and with kind of how other people around you in the time that you are living think and feel, you are giving, you're wrapping a section of reality within a bubble of understanding, and then that is your narrative. But because it's an artificial bubbling, it's an arbitrary gathering of a certain section of reality, is in constant flux. For instance, the other day I saw in my house, um, on the frame of the window behind my sofa, there was a bee, a dead bee. And then the day after I looked, and then there were two, and yesterday I looked, and there's a bunch of them. So it's behind the sofa, the frame, so I don't clean that often. But because it's very low, it's maybe 20 centimeters from the floor, that bottom frame of the window, I suppose the bees, they see the flowers right outside. And the door is far from this window in bee terms. So I was thinking, so these poor bees, they get to this window and then they see the flowers outside, and then they want to get to them, and they don't know how to compute the fly around the door, and they die in their attempt to reach a flower that is really 10 centimeters away because it's just by the window. And I was thinking, I've been in this house listening to music, I've been with friends, I've been working, and if someone asks me how was your afternoon, or how are things at home, and I would say fine, beautiful, happy, and simultaneously that I am happy, this little bee is dying, unable to reach the flower that is 5 centimeters in what might be a really agonizing death. I don't know if they feel sadness, but yeah, imagine if you are near your house and somehow there is a force field that you are unable to cross, and you see your family and you see the destination that you want to get, and they cannot hear you, and somehow you get stuck behind this force field and you are unable to cross it, and you die there 1 meter away from your home. Yeah, that sounds like a horrible situation, a horrible death. So this is happening at the same time as I'm having a beautiful afternoon and eating boiled eggs with potatoes, or or listening to a podcast. So if I describe my afternoon within the normal narrative, the, the drama of this group of bees dying on my window frame, I wouldn't even consider it. It wouldn't even pass through my mind. And yet, it is happening. It is a coexisting reality. So if I take the outline of my narrative and I stretch it a little bit wider to include not just me and the human things in my house, but I include, in this case, the population of bees, I would have a narrative where in my existence there's a lot of beauty, but there's also a lot of pain. Just the pain is not mine. But only because it was not included in the first narrative it doesn't mean that it isn't there. So, this was just a simple explanation of how, as you widen your perspective, we need also to widen the explanations that give contextualization to the new perspective. And one could even argue that that is what makes us human, a continuous exploration of who we are, of the world that we live in, of the relationships that we have with one another, a continuous expansion of our perceived limitations, an expansion also of the awareness of how many things join us rather than separate us, and the ability to invent new narratives that produce new worlds where we are thriving, we are happy, we are living in tolerance with one another. And spiritually, if you pay attention to the traditional teachings, they're always transcend what you think you know and go beyond. And then at a certain point, you hook on to a new level of understanding, and the teacher will come transcend what you think you know and go beyond. And by going beyond and beyond and beyond, yeah, you rediscover yourself and reality under a new light where the old paradigm, yeah, falls apart due to its inaccuracy by being too narrow. You have outgrown what you thought reality and yourself to be. But besides this kind of general understanding of the explanations of reality that we live under, I think we live in a very special time in history. We are going through a very, very unique time in history. Beforehand, let's say, let's take a trip back 1,000 years ago, yeah? Mm, from the moment of birth till the moment of death, the world that you lived in probably was very similar. So there was a necessity to adapt your narratives to the different stages of your life and maybe the different changes in your opinion or your situation. Yeah, your narrative, if you break a leg, the things that you can do and the person that you are to your environment and the way your environment feels for you is different than before you had a broken leg. But what is happening lately is that the narrative of the world that we share together, the consensus reality, is changing all the time, and the paradigms that we have been living under, they're not useful anymore. They're not accurate descriptions of reality anymore. And this, we're used to it to a certain degree because it has been going on since, let's say, the beginning of progress. The beginning, maybe you can say the Industrial Revolution, or maybe you can say the Renaissance. But we can see how things change at certain point, and then it became so that the world of a man would be different by the time that he dies in comparison to the world that he was born into. And this would affect all areas of this person's life. The technology would be different. the political landscape would be different, the cultural landscape would be different, the music that was playing in the radio, if there was a radio, would be different, the mating habits, the courting habits, the financial movements, the superpowers in the world, anything from the micro to the macro is different at the time of death than when you're born. It's just that the speed is increasing and increasing and increasing. So now we have a new world completely different than the one we were living in within 10 years. Soon it will be within a year. And this means that the outlines of our comprehension bubbles, the outlines of our narratives, they need to pop and reform and pop and reform like soap bubbles. Take for example a city in let's say in the States in the 50s where you look and then you have a soft evaluation, this is a happy place. But then one day um, Rosa Parks decides to remain seated in the bus. And then awareness comes up. Ah, there is no happiness, and there is unless there is happiness as well for the black population. And then the bubble of happiness that does not include the black population pops. That is no longer happiness. Happiness needs to include all races. Okay? So now we establish a new happiness bubble. But at certain points, the situation of women, or the situation of homosexuals, or the situation of the poor versus the rich. And like this, socially, many bubbles needed to pop and new ones reform to be able to welcome within them the new understanding that the population, that people were having about how they wanted to live. And this has, in this case, talking about the social movements, has created a tendency towards more tolerance, towards more inclusion, towards a greater ability to cohabitate with one another and respect one another. But the process is obviously still incomplete. Within reality, there is more than just us. There is nature, there is ecosystems, there is other nations where maybe we have pushed the poverty towards or the social injustice. And since reality is real and relentless, eventually we have to deal with this. Yeah. Eventually there is a conflict which is outside my agreed upon narrative that begins to challenge it. Maybe is an ecological disaster or a weather change, or maybe is war in another country, or maybe there is financial instability that originates externally but then touches my own economy. So the narratives are only provisional. They need to keep expanding as our awareness and our consciousness expand. And to a certain degree, we are all used to this. But I don't think any one of us is used to the rhythm that this expansion or this transformation of previously agreed upon narratives will have to be from now on. I don't know how it is for you, but if I think in the last 4 or 5 years, like my worldview is completely different. My view on what I thought politics were, my view on what I thought humanity was going towards, of who were running and for which motives, the show, um, of even what life is and the meaning of life is for myself and for the ones that I love. It's so different now than it was in 2020 January. Really, really incredibly different. And the speed is increasing and it's already difficult to catch up. Not even to catch up, to simply understand. I mean, I'm not saying understand how nature works like when we studied in school physics and biology. Not that they are staying static. The narratives of physics and biology are also changing. But to understand our human creation, the politics, the finance, the technology, how to deal with computers, now with AI, now we have UFOs in the in the mix, and only these two are exponential because the transformation that AI can do to technology, or the transformation that would create, imagine the paradigm shift if all of a sudden we are coexisting in the planet with all the other intelligences or creatures from a different galaxy or a different dimension. So not only we are going more and more towards a funky world, but we are going towards a funky world faster and faster and faster and faster. And our consensus story is not working anymore. Our consensus story that we share with one another, where there is the world with certain countries, and in the countries that we live in, there is democracy, and the democracy and the progress is slowly, slowly bringing us to a better, more beautiful world. And those who are in power have been democratically elected, and they have the good interest of their citizens first, and a number of other assumptions about what is communal living and about what is our purpose as a civilization are being seriously challenged, and seriously challenged very, very quickly. And frankly, it's overwhelming. I suppose you feel it too. It's overwhelming. um, to have the ability to absorb so much change at, at all levels, including the very big levels, already when we understand so little, to not know who you can trust, who is acting according to the motives that they are acknowledging, and who is acting according to ulterior motives that they are hiding from you. It's overwhelming. It really is. But reality is what it is. And it is, like I said before, relentless. And the guidance seems to be very clear. Move beyond your narratives. And that was the guidance that came in meditation. It was in a moment I was practicing, and a voice said, "Move beyond the narrative. Move beyond the narrative." And it was interesting because it didn't say move beyond thought. Thought remain, but once the narrative disappeared, a completely new space appeared, a space of purity, of perception, I would say, where everything is what is, where everything felt uncontextualized and raw and clear and immediate and real, very, very real. Now, in our lives, going beyond the narrative, going beyond the preconceptions of ourselves and what we can do and what we cannot do, it really implies the acceptance that everything is possible, that everything is possible at a personal level and that everything is possible at a collective level. And that is both for positive and for negative or painful. But my impression is that what is required from us in the new world that is coming is an increasing elasticity of what we believe to be true and an increasing capacity to adopt new paradigms and refine them almost on the go. Reality is asking from us to be very comfortable with not knowing, to be very comfortable in situations and realities where it's not clear cut and the answers are not given right away and the solutions are hiding from plain sight and the problems that we face are complex, and to sustain engagement, to sustain commitment to life, to love, to relationships within the confusion, to not disengage, to not give up, to not, just because it's overwhelming, to not know what is coming next, to not look away from reality and stay calm, stay clear, and stay committed to be with reality, to be with a new reality that it's wild, it's unpredictable, it's unfathomable, where those who you thought they were the good guys, they're not the good guys. And that which looked like it was going to be the solution for everything is not the solution for everything. And that which looked like it was going to be the biggest problem is actually not that big of a problem. But then tomorrow you wake up and all of them have changed again. And it's not a life that feels comfortable, at least not for me. I'm a heavy Taurus. So to live in a continuous whirlpool of change, doesn't sound like super fun. But it's what is. It's what is, and the more elastic we find ourselves to be with our narratives, and whenever possible, the more able we are to even be without a narrative for a second and just be reality as it comes. I think the less we will suffer and the more likely to build a new beautiful world will be. And I'm not incredibly optimistic about this, but I know that if this comes, it's not going to be built by a bunch of dogmatic people who are holding on to a truth that is immobile and unchangeable. That will not happen. So, my guide said, move beyond narrative. See reality for what it is. And then, when confronted with the necessity to build a new narrative, so that we can share a consensus reality together, build that new relative with a lot of tolerance and a lot of elasticity, because very soon you will need to drop it again, once more move beyond it, and the process will repeat and repeat and repeat for as long as you have the strength to do so. But the less we resist the process, the longer the strength will last. And because we are opening to the new, and the new is really unknowable, we never know. We really never know. In this new reality that keeps forming in front of us, we don't know when it's going to surprise us positively. And this is something I tell myself every day. Create a new narrative that always holds space for the positive, because you never know. You never know. Since my understanding is by definition limited, how much beauty am I living outside my bubble of understanding? Sure, how much dirt, how much ugliness, how much corruption, for sure. But how much beauty? Imagine how much beauty is waiting to be seen, to be discovered. Yeah. Hmm. I'm sure I'll be thinking about this one, and I can almost already feel that the next one I will have to touch upon subjects that have been touched here in completely. But for now, and without difficulty it has been to put this forth, I'm going to say I'm satisfied, and I'm going to upload this audio as my episode number 9. Thank you as always for listening, for supporting me, for believing in me, and yeah, I hope that is useful. I hope that it gives you company. Um, yeah, I hope that in one way or another it helps you understand yourself better. Big hug, my friends.